let us never forget, on February 28th, this was, what, about 2 months ago? More or less? Yeah, exactly 2 months ago. February 28th, the Senate proposed a bill to avoid the sequester. It would have avoided the sequester. No problem with air traffic control, cutting off long-term unemployment benefits, cutting back on Meals for Wheels, cutting out food, lunch supplies for poor kids in Appalachia. And, the bill included an elimination of tax subsidies to big oil, closing loopholes for companies that ship their jobs overseas, and lowering itemized deductions on incomes over $4 million a year. Every single Republican voted against it. Not most. Every single Republican. February 28th would have ended the sequester. Tell me, the president talks about the dysfunction in Washington, D.C. The Republicans have to learn how to get together and get stuff done. He really needs to read Robert Draper's book, Do Not Ask What Good We Do. In that book, Robert Draper talks about how right after President Obama was sworn into office, in fact, the day that he was sworn into office, January 20th, 2009, Robert Draper documents how Frank Luntz, Paul Ryan, Eric Cantor, Kevin McCarthy, now this is the leadership of the Republicans in the House, with the exception of John Boehner, Pete Sessions, Jeb Hensarling, Pete Hoekstra, Dan Lundgren, these are all members of the House, Senators Jim DeMint, who now runs the Heritage Foundation, John Kyle, Tom Coburn, John Ensign, and Bob Corker, all Republicans, got together with Frank Luntz and Newt Gingrich at the Caucus Room restaurant, just literally in the same building Louise and I lived at the time. Or actually, we lived there a year later, but came to live at the corner of D and 9th Northwest here in Washington, D.C. They got together in a private room in the Caucus Room restaurant, and they basically swore, this is it. Now, keep in mind, on that day, January 20th, 2009, America was losing 750,000 jobs a month. They wanted to keep it that way. Pete Sessions, who was there, described the meeting, and he said, this was 2 months later, in an interview with the National Journal, he said, and I quote, I'm using his words, Taliban insurgency. We understand perhaps a little bit more because of the Taliban. Insurgency is the way they went about systematically understanding how to disrupt and change a person's entire processes, and these Taliban are an example of how you go about changing a person from their message to their operations, to their frontline message. And we need to understand that insurgency may be required when dealing with the Democrats, when dealing with the other side. He went on to say, if these Democrats do not give us those options or opportunities, then we will have become an insurgency. I think insurgency is a mindset and an attitude, and we're going to have to search for and find ways to get our message out and be prepared to see things for what they are rather than trying to do something about them. And, 13 weeks passed after this when actually some fairly good legislation got passed through because the Republicans could only get 39 votes to block legislation in the Senate. And then Scott Brown got sworn in. Barack Obama and his entire presidency had control of both the House and the Senate for 13 weeks. That's it. Got a hell of a lot done in those 13 weeks. I used to have a list of it around here. Here it is right here. Middle-class tax cut, Chrysler saved, GM saved, 800,000 monthly job losses have become monthly gains now for over 30 months. Education spending increase, student loan costs decrease, hate crime laws strengthened, Affordable Care Act, CHIPS expanded, enforcement of child labor laws, Wall Street reform, credit card reform, predatory lending to soldiers restricted, troops paid for stop-loss time, torture was stopped, VA spending was increased, women could serve on subs, equal pay for women, nuclear arms reduction and disposal, BP agreed to a $20 billion cleanup fund. which saves us $20 billion. EPA was strengthened. FDA powers were broadened. 9/11 responder health care was finally funded after, the entire Bush administration, they ignored the 9/11 responders. And Don't Ask, Don't Tell, Don't Tell was repealed. And then Scott Brown got it in the Senate, and the Republicans had 40 votes. And so they could say, you have to have 60 votes in order to pass something. And they have stopped everything ever since. What did Kevin McCarthy say after the meeting? This meeting, the night that Barack Obama was sworn into office 5 years ago? He said, we got to challenge them on every single bill, show united and unyielding opposition to the president's economic policies. Keep in mind, the day that he said this is something he said at the meeting. The day he said this, we were losing 750,000 jobs a month. These guys wanted to keep it that way so that Obama would get the blame for the failure of 32 years of Reaganomics. These, by the way, were the same guys who said yes to the Bush-Cheney 2008 January stimulus, yes to the Bush-Cheney bailout of Bear Stearns, yes to the Bush-Cheney bailout of AIG, yes to Bush-Cheney's TARP in September of 2008, and yes to Bush-Cheney's TARP in October of 2008. No to anything coming out of the White House ever since. They supported Bush-Cheney spending $4 trillion while giving tax cuts to the top 1%. They supported keeping the cost of both wars, Iraq and Afghanistan, off the budget so that huge explosion of debt didn't occur during the Bush years. It occurred during the Obama years because Obama finally put it on the budget and said, hey, here it is. Senators Jim DeMint, John Kyle, Tom Coburn, John Ensign, and Bob Corker have filibustered more than 300 bills, more than any Congress in history. They voted no on everything, including Al Franken's anti-rape amendment, Lilly Ledbetter Act, the Fair Pay Act, the anti-outsourcing bill. This is why we're at.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 866-987-THOM.
And the president tried to close Guantanamo, and as he pointed out, you got to have the money to do that. It costs money, and only Congress can appropriate money, and the Republicans have said no.